I think for me, one of the first times I heard somebody talk about their CV or their resume, it seemed like such an adult thing. Like, grown-ups have a CV that they just drop at various jobs and they give them a call and they say, oh, look, you seem to be the person we want to hire. And slowly, as I've made that painful transition into an adult, I realized, yeah, it actually is pretty important to have a really good CV. So let's talk about how you can create the perfect CV.
If this is the first time you're checking out our channel, welcome. Basically what we do is we run a website that's totally free known as roadtok.com, and it will explain the ins and outs about everything related to the United Kingdom and what it takes for you to work as a doctor in the NHS. So if you've not already, please stalk us on all of our social media. Find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe.
Hey guys, Ibreez here. So let's see, what is a CV? You'll hear it as curriculum vitae, resume, that little piece of paper that pretty much explains your entire life. So the CV, the resume, whatever you want to call it, it's a pretty important piece of paper, or maybe a couple of pages of paper, depending on how important you are and how many things you've done in your life that you want to talk about. Where it becomes important in your road to UK, in your journey to become a doctor in the NHS, can vary. There are some roles where, for instance, if you're applying for the foundation program, you don't need to submit a CV. That's not part of the application process. But in other roles, especially if it's a trust grade job, you're looking on NHS jobs or track jobs, or a more specialized job, maybe like a fellowship or anything like that, you will realize they're going to ask you for a CV, and they're going to expect you to have one pretty much ready. You don't want it to be something that you have to do the night before you have to submit it, because it's not going to come out very nice or clean, and you might miss the vital points and information that you need. For me, I think I have about 3 types of CVs, if I'm completely honest with you. I have my generic I would like to be hired please CV that talks about all my attributes as a doctor and the things that I do. I have another CV if I'm applying for something that's more academically inclined that talks about my attributes from that wing. And of course my third CV, which I kind of talk about things that are applicable to me as a leader or someone who wants to instill change or anything like that. And that's very dependent on the role that I'm applying for. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to have more than one CV. I think everyone realizes, unless you're talking about a full CV, like that covers every little aspect of your life, you really don't need to have anything very long, especially at our stages or in our career. A one-page CV tends to be enough. You might push it to 2 pages if you're a consultant or if you've done quite a few publications that you feel are relevant. But that's the key word, being relevant to whatever you're applying to. So if you have substantial, experience in one particular field and some other experience in other fields, but the thing that you're actually applying for is the thing that you have the substantial experience in, that should be the bulk of your CV. You don't need to mention any extra things unless it's actually relevant to the post in some way. It's not filler. You're not going to be the person that's chosen just because you've got the most words on a piece of paper. Those words have to make sense, and they have to be something that catches the eye of the person who's reading it, so that they stop and say, ah yes, they've got experience, they've also got this going on. I can definitely see how that kind of a person is something that we need in our department or in our, in our ward or whatever. So remember that. Your CV should not just be a bunch of things that you think they might want to know. The other thing to remember is it should be under the right heading. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about headings in a second, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that international doctors make is they want to put every little thing they've ever done, ever, on a CV. And I'm not just talking about it being irrelevant at that point, I'm talking about things that aren't even things to be mentioned. Like, for instance, unless you are specifically applying for something that they really want to know what your IELTS score is, you don't need to put your IELTS score on your CV. Yes, you can put a section on there where you talk about your languages if you speak a couple of languages and how fluent you are in those languages, by all means. But outside of that, it's honestly not necessary. And even if they said that they want somebody with this particular IELTS score, I'm not necessarily certain how much I would want to put it on there as a thing of interest, like it must be there, because you could always produce your certificate for your IELTS score later on. It's not something that you necessarily need to point out then and there, especially if you have other means to prove it. Something else that I feel like you never need to mention is PLAB. PLAB is not a postgraduate exam, guys. We've talked about this, like, I don't know, for in how many videos, but basically, remember, it's just a licensing exam. So same with USMLE. If you've done any licensing exam for any country around the world, It doesn't mean anything. It's not a postgraduate qualification. It's not actually like a diploma course or a master's or a PhD or anything like that. It's not relevant. You don't need to be mentioning those things. Now let's get into the main headings and the kind of general things that you can put under these headings. The first thing at the tippy top, most people keep it at least at the top, it'll be your personal statement or just kind of a short intro about you. And remember, the key word here is short. It doesn't need to be like a 6-paragraph intro into your life. Nothing like that. Give them a quick idea of who you are, your background, and what you've done thus far, and perhaps a little bit about what your dreams and aspirations are, and that's enough. Next is the bulk of your application, your clinical experience. And here again, I will reiterate, your relevant clinical experience. Because guys, let's be real, if you worked at Pizza Hut for a while, even if it was for 2 whole summers, it's not really relevant if you're trying to apply for a job as a clinical fellow in whatever department in a hospital. It's just not relevant. It's not the same thing at all. Make sure, of course, that you are going in descending order. So the most recent job comes first, and then so on and so forth all the way down. Please also remember your internship. Yeah, guys, that counts as clinical experience. Don't knock yourself thinking, oh, I was just an intern. What did I really do? Well, you did something. You came to work every day, didn't you? So please make sure you remember that you have your internship to put there. You don't have to split your internship as per each rotation, that, each separate rotation is a separate heading. You can keep it under one heading and explain in your little bubble underneath that you had rotational experience in whatever departments, and then talk about generally what you did in that role. The next headings would be about your education and any other further membership type exams. So for your education, of course, your medical degree. If in your country you've done any further degrees, or even in the UK, any masters, PhDs, etc. like that, even if you're still undergoing them, like you're still trying to complete the course, but you're in the process of completing it, by all means, mention it. In terms of postgraduate exams, you could put stuff like MRCP or MRCS or anything like that you've done. Again, guys, here, PLAB does not exist. USMLE, IELTS, OET, none of that needs to be going here. Also, you don't need to go any later than your medical school. You don't need to talk about high school, middle school, elementary school, nursery school. I guess if you really want to talk about that you went to a Montessori school, you can, but it's not really like, no one cares. It's not relevant. It's just, remember, if it's not relevant, you don't put it. So what would be relevant here if you're applying for your job? A medical school. Yes, of course. They need to know that you graduated from medical school. All right. Have you done any other schooling beyond that? Have you done any postgraduate qualifications? You want to talk about those exams and when you've done them, or your process of doing any sort of postgraduate degree, mention it. Next is your training courses and certifications. Now, there's a ton of misconceptions here as well, guys. Okay, I know there's a lot of accessibility now in terms of the kinds of courses that you can access online, and it seems like everyone and their mother is saying, oh, look, we've got this course, book this course with us, do that course with us, and they're like an hour or two long, or maybe half a day, and you're like, fine, I have 30,000 courses that I can put on here, a random CPD. First of all, remember, stuff like that, it has to be relevant. And to be honest with you, the things that are not just relevant, but that are actually way more, are courses that have been vetted, that people have known about for quite a long period of time, and involves some amount of practical skill and experience that you're getting. It's one thing to sit there and watch a video that's called a course, and somebody says, okay, at the very end of this video, you will give you, a CPD form or something, and it's a whole nother game for you to actually be physically involved in learning and having a kind of practical exam in that process of you learning. So things that you can put here are things like ALS, ACLS, ALERT, ILS, BLS. These are really good, nice courses that you should be putting in. Ideally, for things like ALS, they should be Recess UK certified. If you don't have them at the time of your making your CV, it's okay. Put what you have, but know that eventually you will need to get a Recess UK certified type course for those types of courses. The other things that you might be mentioning here are relevant courses like, basic surgical skills, or any sort of, maybe you learn how to do a colonoscopy or an endoscopy in your country, even if there's some sort of relevant equivalency that happens there, mention it. If you're certified in anything, maybe you've already learned how to do endoscopies and you're certified in doing those now in your country, mention it. Put your country's local regulatory board or whatever board regulates it and says that, yes, fine, you're somebody who's able to do this without supervision. Mention those things. Don't shy away from the things and the experiences that you've picked up in your home country thinking, oh, well, what if they don't accept it? What if they only want things from the UK? No. They want to know about your experiences, and you should mention your experiences. The last main bit is you can talk about your skills or your interests. Now, sometimes we struggle. We wonder, okay, what should we really put here? It can just be a couple of bullet points. Just, nice kind of catchy words like teamworking, communication, adaptability, things like that. And that's really enough. You can just put a couple of things there. It doesn't have to be like a whole book worth. And you can say, all right, fine, CV done. There are some extra things that you can mention in that if you have them, great. And if you don't, it's okay. Honestly, the stuff that I've mentioned up until now is pretty much the crux of your CV. Like, you, of course, should have your name on your CV, your deets, your personal statement, your clinical experience, your education, your certifications and training courses. That needs to be there. The other things that you can add on are things like research, audits, publications, maybe any extra languages you speak, volunteer experience. Those are kind of the other things that if you want to fill in, or any leadership posts even that you've held that you're like, I actually think it's relevant for me to mention here. Again, don't think you need to start mentioning things that aren't necessarily things that you've done. Don't bend the truth if you're like going to say, oh, well, I used to captain my school's, football team. Maybe I should mention that here as a leadership skill. Come on, guys, you're really stretching it at that point. So again, think about things that you've done recently that are useful, things that you can talk about at length if they ask you about it, and of course make sense to the role that you're applying for. I'm not saying that if you were, the head of some sort of sports team that it wouldn't be relevant, but it needs to be something that makes sense to the role you're applying for. If you think it makes sense, mention it. If you think, I don't really know if this really makes sense, or if they'll wonder why I've put this here, you're probably better off not mentioning it. And, don't start comparing your CV to other people's CVs. Don't think, oh, my CV looks really sparse next to so-and-so's. What if they say, well, why don't I have this or why don't I have that? That's not the end all be all. If you have structured your CV really nicely and you've made it attractive where you highlight your main attributes, that, in my opinion, makes a bigger impact than having something that's like crammed on a piece of paper. I mean, I have seen a lot of CVs, and I tend to think the ones that are most aesthetically pleasing are the ones that provide the right information in a good amount of space and also leave a little bit of white space. I believe white space is important and it is pleasing to the eye because you want to see, yes, things have been done here, but here's some nice restful white space as well. That's complementing all of the extra chaos that's written in the middle. So don't feel obligated to stuff every corner and make it, really crazy. In terms of actually how you might want to design your CV, keep it simple. Remember that. Keep it simple, stupid. You don't have to get crazy about it. If you think the easiest way for you to do it is a Word document, make it a Word document. It doesn't have to be a fancy PDF or anything like that. And to be honest with you, if you make it a Word document, you can always just convert it into a PDF. It doesn't need to have some fancy fonts. It doesn't need to be, rainbow colors or a flower in the corner or smell like lilacs or anything like that. Just get the main information across. Remember, it needs to be readable. They need to look at it and be able to understand what's happening. So none of that white on white stuff or weird, block outlines or cursive-y stuff that nobody actually understands what's happening. You might be wondering, okay, I know you said earlier, Ibreez, you need to talk about or put on there okay, where do I live or all that stuff, but what if I don't live in the UK? What should I just put that information? Yeah, for sure. But I will give you one piece of advice. Whatever email address you put on there, if you don't have a professional email right now, please make it sound professional. Your email shouldn't be bobthebuilder@gmail.com or something like that, unless you actually are Bob and you're a builder, because then it makes sense. So try. The failsafe is always your first name dot your last name at whatever.com. Make that email address just for this if you have to, so that you have a nice professional sounding email for them to contact you on. Don't worry about the rest of the stuff because that's really not a big deal. Of course, you might be wondering, well, how often am I actually even going to be submitting a CV? If I'm going to put all this time and effort into making something look good, I better be using it a lot because it's not going to be worth my time. So for me, I submitted a CV with my first NHS jobs. It was optional, but I still uploaded one. I also submitted a CV, so I didn't need to submit anything with my training application. You don't have to provide a CV for that. But I did also submit my CV when I applied for different things, different leadership posts. So for instance, when I applied to be chair of the Junior Doctors Committee, for my Freedom to Speak Up Guardian post, for different fellowships that I've just generically applied for throughout these years. And actually, in my current role as a clinical research fellow, I also submitted a CV. So it really is dependent on the things that you do. And in general, I think it's always good to have one handy because you never know when an opportunity presents itself and somebody wants to know a little bit about you. You can say, that's all right, I'll just shoot you my CV and you'll have a clear idea of where I'm coming from. So I always like to keep a generically updated CV in my back pocket whenever, I mean, not literally my back pocket, but you know what I mean. It's something that I can send along to someone as and when if they ask for it, because you never know when an opportunity might present itself, and you always want to be ready for that opportunity. So if you have something that's already there, that's singing your praises, why not submit it? I kind of feel like there's going to be some of you out there who are going to be like, Ibreez, this is impossible. I am not able to do all of this stuff. I cannot. I don't care that you've explained it to me, or, you know, there's an article where you guys have talked about how to do this, or generically that you're telling me I can do it because you always try and, you know, pump us up with self-esteem and all that good stuff. But you have an option. If you feel like, you know what, no, I know you've told me that I can do this, but I really can't. I know I can't, or I won't be able to do it properly, or I'm going to get unhappy with how it comes out. We can do it for you. We do offer a personalized guidance session where we will talk all of this through with you in terms of what will your CV entail and what would you like to highlight in your CV and what kind of role you're actually applying for. And then after that, we go away and we create a beautiful CV for you, highlighting those attributes, and you get to keep it. So if that's something you're interested in, if you want to book a session with us, that is linked in the description box below. But until next time, guys, please continue to follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check us out on our Road to UK forum, and book other sessions with us if you think you want to, and talk to us a little bit, and we'll see you next time. Bye.